All right. Well, I'm excited today because I made a new friend, Rick Robinson,
It's
and we just decided to record a podcast together. Like,
do it.
why not?
Why
Rick,
not?
how are you today?
I actually think it's cool, man, that we get to have a sporadic conversation.
Yeah, man, I'm pumped about it. So, really excited. But let's start here, man. How did you get started in the gospel music industry?
Well, I'm born and raised in church. Man. I didn't have when I was a kid. I didn't have a choice of when I went to go to church. My mom used to make me go to church. All of my Sundays were booked, and I started off actually singing in the choir. I was as a young person. I was a youth in the choir at church. And then I began to get serious about my singing. So I joined the Soul Church in Chicago, which is a youth choir out of Chicago. But what happened was I would be in the choir and I would get so distracted by the musicians playing that I would get in trouble for not singing. So, so I was the kid that would stay after rehearsal and watch all the musicians, play and practice or whatever. So I grew to love the actual music side of it. Now, fast forward to how I got into the music industry. Again, I started playing in church when I was 14 years old. Um, and
Wow.
yeah, 14 years old. I was playing the organ in my church. When I turned 18, 19 years old, I started paying attention to songs, like songwriting. And so that took a turn for me from it growing to a hobby to a passion. And that was the beginning of my journey. I started like
Yeah.
a lot of musicians did in the church. And I'm from Chicago, Illinois, which is like the mecca of gospel music. So I've always been exposed to the best of them in this industry, coming out of this city. This city has
Yeah.
such a rich history for gospel music stuff. It's technically the birthplace of gospel music. And so you take that history of being in the demographic that I'm in, as well as growing up in church, it kind of was unavoidable for me to pursue the industry side of it. And then I learned about when I got to college, I learned about royalties and publishing, and I was like, oh, okay, so you can get paid for this. I'm like, I didn't
Come
know.
on, let's do it.
Yeah, I was real when I first started. I was just happy to be doing this. I didn't pay attention to contracts or anything. I just was happy to be doing it. But when I found out that you could be at home and receive an envelope in the mail for publishing and royalties, that changed my whole perspective of how I looked at the industry of music as opposed to what I was used to as the ministry of music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So tell it give us a little bit of history, Rick. Why is Chicago the birthplace of gospel music? Take us back
Okay.
to
Well,
why that's the case.
let me say Chicago. And let me rephrase that, David, and say Chicago is the birthplace of modern gospel music because our ancestry and our history in gospel music goes back to far as I can, far way further than I can remember and where it started.
Yeah.
Our ancestry and our history, it goes back to Africa and the rhythms in Africa. So I wouldn't say, I don't know if it's the exact place of where it actually started from the beginning, but I do know that Thomas Dorsey, who is known as the father of gospel music, is from Chicago, and he wrote "Precious Lord, Take My Hand" at Pilgrim Baptist Church, which is technically about 10 minutes down the street from where I live now. And that is one of the moments in our history of gospel that is noted as one of the first modern gospel songs to be made and recorded. So
Okay.
yeah. Now we have different people that will give you different take. Now, people from California and Los Angeles will say they were the authors of contemporary gospel music by way of Andre Crouch, Walter Hawkins, and the Hawkins
Yeah.
family. And then you have people in Detroit that claim gospel music because we have the Clark sisters and Thomas Whitfield and all of those. But Chicago is definitely one of the main hubs. I'll just call it that. Even if I can't take the credit for it being the birthplace, although that's what has been said a
Yeah.
lot, I'll say that it is one of the main hubs of gospel music, especially the choir scene. Uh, we have
Mm,
multiple Grammy-winning choirs here. The Thompson Community Singers, Ricky Dillard and New Generation. The list goes on and on. Chicago has uh, the Great Boy. It's a lot of choirs that come out of Chicago. We've cultivated that culture of choir music for pretty much here.
yeah. Suffice it to say, there's a rich history. You could isolate probably different cities
Yes.
around the country
Yes.
and unpack so much diversity within the
Yeah.
genre. Rick, I want to use this sort of as the frame for the rest of our conversation today. But there was an interview posted between Isaac Caree and Norman Gyamfi.
Mhm.
I don't know, a week ago, 2 weeks ago. I don't know how long it's
It's about a
been,
week
but
ago.
it's called The Truth About the Gospel Music Industry That They Don't Want to Hear. And it's caused quite a stir. I mean, it's
As it
just
should have.
spread all over the internet. For those unaware, Rick, what was this conversation about and why is it so controversial?
You got about 3 hours.
Give us the high level overview, right?
Okay, the high
Give us the
level.
overview.
Okay, the high level overview is that Norman Gyamfi is a record executive, a gospel music record executive. So I, like you, probably saw the title of the podcast and said, I need to tune into this, because the truth about gospel music that they don't want to hear. What is that? You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
I tuned into the podcast just like everybody else. And just for the record, Isaac Caree is a friend of mine. I've known Isaac probably the majority of my life. I met Isaac when I was a teenager. I'll say that. And he used to sing with John P. Key, and he used to sing with a group called Man of Standard, and he also sang with Kirk Franklin for 20 years. So I know Isaac very well. And honestly, I do think that he has the pedigree to be a successful podcast host. But I think that, well, we can carry on the conversation, but I tuned in to see Norman, which I've met Norman as well. Um, but I, being a gospel veteran and also a fan of gospel music, tuned in specifically for the purpose of being able to take away something or learn something that we can do better to advance the kingdom, not only the kingdom, but to advance the music industry, the gospel music industry. But when I turned in, I got the exact opposite of that. So just to give your listeners a brief synopsis of why this interview will go down to me in history as a crack in the culture. And the reason I say that is because there is an underlying discussion that's happening in the industry between the difference between CCM music and gospel music. Because to the outside
Yes.
listener, um, most people think gospel, being the good news of Jesus, means that anything we sing about Jesus is gospel music. And I happen to disagree with that. I think there are some distinctions that we need to make, David. The distinction, number one, between, like
Yeah.
I said before we got on the podcast, between ministry and industry. And then there's a difference between gospel music, the sacred music of gospel, and then the gospel music, the business of gospel music. So I tuned in, like you might have tuned in,
Yep.
the hopes of finding some information out of how we can advance our industry, because it has taken some hits through strictly, and that could be to multiple reasons why the music industry has taken hits. We all know the impacts that streaming has made on gospel, on music sales in general, but gospel music has had taken the hit the worst. I think only
Yeah.
2 to 3% of the market share in all of music is gospel. Only 2 or 3% of the market share. So it's already taken a hit, the industry itself. But the bigger issue with the CCM gospel conversation is deeper than just the difference of styles. There's a lot of systemic things that are happening, in my opinion, as a music industry person. I believe there's a lot of systemic things that are happening right now in the realm of gospel music. I don't know how much you listen to, what I would call black gospel music, but it is being, in
Yep.
my opinion, a little bit watered down to fit the CCM style of music. In
Right.
order to fully understand the impact of why Norman Gyamfi's interview was such a impactful interview, and not necessarily in a good way, is because that's the conversation that's been underlying happening for the past 4 or 5 years, is that CCM music is starting to overtake the sound of gospel music. I do believe that we all have the same message. Yes, we all have the message of the redeeming love of Jesus Christ. But when you talk about it from a cultural perspective, our sound is changing. The gospel music sound is changing, and it's changing to accommodate the sound that is being played on the K-Love stations and the Fish and all of those stations, in an effort to try to
Yeah.
appease that sound. So Norman is the representative of Maverick City, right? Now, in this conversation, we
Yeah.
need to have a distinction between who Maverick City is as the actual members of Maverick City, and then the brand of Maverick City. So the actual members of Maverick City, which for the record, I have no problem with. They're amazing, they're talented,
Yeah.
they're gifted, all of those things. But there's a difference between Maverick City being Naomi Rain, Chandler Moore, Dante Moe, Aaron Moses, Brandon Lake, and then Maverick City, the ownership of Maverick City, which is Norman Gyamfi, who is the co-owner of the brand name with Jonathan J.
Right.
We have to make that distinction, because I don't necessarily think that they have the same opinions. I don't think that what Norman said represented what they think. He put targets on their backs, because the average consumer, David, doesn't know the difference between the owner of Maverick City and the singers of Maverick City. I think they have two different opinions of what's happening now.
Yeah. I'll say this too. We don't often hear from the executives, right, in the Christian music industry. And I think that's what was fascinating about this conversation is you could tell Norman probably doesn't talk about this much. He's not really somebody that uh probably gets interviewed a whole lot. And so it was like this raw, off the cuff, vulnerable, tell it like it is Norman, which I think was revealing a lot. Typically the narratives that we hear around Christian music is just, look what the Lord has done. All of our success has been because of God, right? But we don't talk about the business side. We don't talk about maybe some systemic injustice that's built into the system. Norman was like at least honest about capitalizing on a cultural moment, right? He talked about buying into Maverick City. He talked about the pandemic and pairing talented black singers with white producers. And I'm not justifying that, but he was at least, I think, saying out loud what a lot of other maybe record executives talk about behind closed doors. Would you agree with that?
I would definitely agree with that. So I'm privy to a lot of conversations. I know a lot of those executives. I've worked with them as a producer, as a songwriter. And so, like I said, there's been a lot of underlying conversation, but for the first time, somebody literally opened their mouth and let it all out. And I personally believe that if you were to ask the people that he works with how they felt about that podcast, they might not be feeling good right about that. Because he says so much. He said so much unprovoked.
Yeah.
He said so much unprovoked. I was like, wow, like, I'm gonna be honest with you, David. He lost me when he said he was a Trump supporter, because we know what's going on in this country. And I'm on this podcast to speak freely only from my own opinions. I can't speak for anybody else. Here's the thing.
Right.
When we vote, we don't normally talk about who we vote for, right? I don't have a problem with people who vote for who they vote for. We live in a democracy that we have, for now, we live in a democracy that you can vote for who you want to vote for, and nobody can coerce you to vote for anybody. So I don't personally have a problem with the fact that I mean, I do personally have a problem with the fact that he brought up Trump in that interview, but we didn't ask him who he voted for. He just blurted it out. And so when
Yeah. It was the context that was insensitive.
it's the whole interview was sensitive, and I'm gonna call a spade a spade. It was anti-black. It was anti-black, because you
Mm.
said you're a Trump supporter, right? And then you take every opportunity that you can to downgrade our culture. It sounds like he was amplifying white supremacy rhetoric to me. Y'all sing too loud. Y'all do too many runs. Y'all's tone's not simple enough. Y'all play too loud. You do this. Everything y'all do ain't gotta be loud. And people don't understand that stuff. That's our culture though. We're sometimes loud, David. We sometimes do words when we sing. That's our culture. And so for him to not only say that he didn't know anything about the music industry, he told everything you needed to know about Norman Gyamfi. He shared it on his podcast. He let us know, I don't know nothing about music. I don't have a musical bone in my body. But then he has so many opinions about how the music was produced. And then it's one thing if he would have said that he was a Trump supporter, it's one thing to downgrade our culture, but to say you're a Trump supporter and then turn around and downgrade our culture at a time, David, in this country where DEI initiatives are being eliminated everywhere. So if you take
Right.
what's happening in America and then you listen to Norman talking about how we need to do away with all of our black culture, it's anti-black. It was an anti-black conversation.
Yep.
And to not only, he said
Yep.
stuff like, you know who gets it? White people, they get it. Y'all don't get it. He was black talking to us, telling us, do you know who gets it? White people. How do you think that feels? Like, could you imagine if a white
Yeah.
person told you, you know who gets it? David, black people. Can you imagine one of your white friends coming to you and say, you don't get it. White people don't get it. Black people get it. They don't get it. To hear somebody else
Right.
tell us that we don't get it and that white people get it coming from a black man was outrageous to me. It was outrageous to me because
Yeah.
we cannot ignore what's happening with justice in America. And so when you align yourself with somebody that's separating families, putting people in detention centers, they have alligator Alcatraz in Florida. They got people sending people to El Salvador that never lived there. These are all happening in real time. I'm sure you're aware of how many DEI
Right.
initiatives are being eliminated. They've co-opted our word woke, and that made woke a bad thing when the opposite of being woke is sleep. Should we be sleep? So these are all movements that are happening in the country right now where we're trying and we're trying to
Yeah.
advance and make progress, and progress is being brought back. They're bringing back progress. They're taking away laws. All these things are happening in the political atmosphere. And then somebody came on a podcast and championed it and then told us that we don't get it. He told his own people,
Yeah.
this is white people, we don't get it. And that was to me was the most deeply offensive
Yeah.
thing that he could say, because we're not a monolith. So we have our own thoughts. We don't all act the same way. And to me, it sounded
Yeah.
more like the type of conversations you hear Ben Carson, Herschel Walker, and those like,
Fox News.
yeah, Fox News. Fox News. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So I feel like that was not the place it felt like we were being chastised by one of our home.
What's interesting about it for me, Rick, is the whole framing of it was how he got wealthy off of it too. The whole point was because of this alignment with white supremacy, essentially, I've become rich, right? Even the story of Travis Green and singing at the White House, all of this, the Maverick City sort of decisions was like, I have made a fortune off of this, and therefore black gospel music is missing out.
Yeah, he called it still.
Yeah.
Quote was the subsequent genre died. He gave it a death certificate. He gave gospel music a death certificate, which was confusing to me
Yeah.
because when is the last time that you've been able to turn on an award show or uh, any type of television opportunity and I see a choir behind, Barbara Streisand or Miley Cyrus singing, or black gospel choirs are used all the time. Pharrell Williams has a choir. They did a song called Joy that they performed at the Louis Vuitton fashion show in Paris. Choir music is still alive.
Yeah.
The problem is our churches aren't as much singing choir music because they feel like the wave now is the worship wave. So the way that he kind of gave the death certificate to gospel music and said this is the way, but he has, I don't mind speaking freely about Norman because I feel like these type of people come along every once in a while. They get loud and they talk, but good integrity always matters. Good character always matters. So if your character is speaking so loud that we don't hear the message because you your character speaking too loud, it's not good. But I do believe that this had to happen. I believe this conversation had to happen. I was wondering, because I'm not gonna lie, David. I was mad for 2 days. I was upset for 2 days. I was like, why would he let us go? I woke up one morning when I did the post on Facebook. I woke up that morning and was like, why would he say that? And so I just started speaking how I felt about the situation. And I think that you caught it.
Right.
You caught it. Let me just say this: it's easy to catch a wave. And what I mean by that is, if Norman would have started with Maverick City, if Norman would have went and scouted all these people out, Chandler Moore and Dante Moore, and put them in a room together and produce them, and then he could probably pound his chest a little harder, but he didn't. By the time Norman Gyamfi connected with Maverick City, they were already touring. They were already touring. They had already worked with
Yeah.
Elevation and did Old Church basically. They had, started working with Elevation and Stephen Furtick. They had already been exposed. So he let us know on that podcast that it was at the Clubhouse call that he heard us having a conversation about Maracy, that he joined the way. So all he had was enough resources to pay for things, to be quite honest with you. He has no creative equity, so to speak, so much. Even so much so, David, that he said, and I quote, we took black faces, put them in a studio with white producers and white writers and made them sing straight, which is not the truth. That is not the truth.
Right.
Dante Moore,
Yeah.
Chandler Moore, Naomi Rain wrote 70% of that music. They wrote at least 70% of
Yeah.
that music. So to me, that right there is even a whitewashing to say it ain't even their own creativity that made them famous. We put them in the studio with white people. That's what he said. That's
Mm.
not the truth. Those black kids
Yep.
wrote those songs.
Yep.
Why would you say that you had to put
Yeah.
in the studio with white
100%.
producers and white writers? That's not the truth. But it was the narrative. The narrative is we took white producers and white songwriters and developed these black kids to sing CCM music. And that's just not the truth. That's not the truth.
Yeah.
They were all
I wanna break down because the points of your Facebook post, I think,
mm,
reveal just some good topics for us to hit on. So
okay.
you mentioned the kinda Donald Trump situation, which makes it complicated, right? But you also talked about how this conversation minimized other avenues of success in the music industry,
Yes.
and maybe that touring is not for everybody, big business, is not for everybody, that there's other ways to be successful as a gospel artist, like
Yes.
music ownership. Can you talk more about that?
Yes, I can. Norman's strength is that he has relationships with Live Nation, different people to get gospel music in bigger arenas. But we are discounting the journey of the majority of the artists in the music industry, not just gospel music, David, but just the majority of artists. We tell them, unless you're singing in arenas, you ain't doing nothing. If we tell them the only way they're doing something is they sing in arenas, or we tell them the only way they're doing something is if they win 4 Grammys, or we tell them the only way they're successful is that you have a #1 song, we're doing a disservice to the artist community. Music has changed over time, and we have been given the tools have been given out evenly. So I can put an album out, you can put an album out, whatever you want to put an album out. We don't have to necessarily go to a big distribution machine. Isaac Caree specifically asked Norman, what would you say to the independent artist? Because everything he's saying is on a major scale, but everybody, truth be told, that's not what
Right.
the industry is. There are many independent artists. So Isaac Cruz specifically asked him, what would you say to the independent artists? And he basically said, if you don't sign with us, you're crazy. That's what he said. But the truth of the matter is, he couldn't took that opportunity. They would say there are many avenues to be an artist. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to perform at the United Center or Staples Center. You can perform. There are venues that range from 50 to 200 seats to 300 to 500 seats. And so instead of empowering the artists and saying, hey, you may not be Maverick City with millions of followers and a whole bunch of songs and performing in stadiums and all this stuff like that, but you could perform at your local church. My wife is a gospel artist. She performs, she recognizes that my audience is not going to fill up an arena. But for the past 5 years, she's been doing concert series at City Winery. which only seats 350 people, but she's consistently sold them out. It is an indictment to make artists feel like if you ain't singing at the stadiums or if you ain't got a number one song with millions of streams, you're not doing nothing. He kind of just made it seem like unless you're on the level of Maverick City, you're not really doing much. And I felt like that was an indictment. I felt like that was an opportunity for him to empower the next generation of independent artists. Somebody's in their bedroom now writing a song and just want to get it out. I personally have my own feelings. Again, I've been a veteran of in the music industry for 27 years. I've lost a lot of money making dumb mistakes. So I think that every chance I get, I would like to empower somebody not to make the same mistakes that I made. And I'm pretty sure Norman has made some bumps in the
Yeah.
road that he had to learn from. And I felt like that would have been a golden opportunity to say, hey, it might not be an easy journey. You might have to start with 100 followers instead of 100,000 followers. You may have to go do, you know what I'm saying, a couple of bars and dive and speakeasies. You might have to sing in a few of those before you get to the stadiums. He just made it seem like the journey needs to go from here to there.
Yeah.
And then it's easy for him to talk from a perspective of signing a group that was already successful.
He basically was saying that Maverick City like redefined the genre,
I don't,
and that
I don't agree
and
with
then you
that.
said they
And
were
I,
maybe amongst the first groups to they magnified diversity because they had black faces, but the sound is not black culture. Can you unpack that?
sure, I sure can. And I might get in trouble for saying this, but we have a sound. Gospel has a sound. CCM has a sound. It's
Yeah.
okay to say that. It's okay to say that. Or maybe the conversation is they not only does it have a sound, it has a color. I'm not a segregationist. I love CCM music. There are a lot of great songs, a lot of great artists that I like. If you remember on the podcast, when he got to talking about Never Would Have Made It by Marvin Sapp, and he said, I can't relate to Never Would Have Made It because my family, my mom and daddy was both doctors and I ain't never been on food stamps. He said that on the podcast.
Mm,
I was thinking to myself, so he's relating the struggle to gospel music of black people, but then he brought in the same sentence he brought up Gyra and if he dresses the lilies as a beacon of hope. But David, our struggle is part of our journey and our sound. So we can't negate slavery. We can't negate Jim Crow laws. We can't negate segregation. And through all of those things that black people had to go through, gospel music, soul music was the soundtrack of that struggle. Although we use gospel music as a soundtrack to our struggle, that doesn't mean we just destitute people. So it doesn't mean if you're going through, the only way you can really relate to gospel music is if you're going through. No, gospel music is the good news. There are plenty of songs that are uplifting, plenty of songs that sing hope to people. Every song isn't a detrimental song of talking about how I got over. So when he relates gospel music to struggle, but then he correlates CCM music as beautiful and glorious and if he dresses the lilies and everything is just warm rays and sunny days, that's an unfair description of what gospel music actually is. But I do believe gospel music has a sound.
yeah.
And I do believe that gospel music has a culture. Again, we could talk about it from the perspective of the ministry side of it. Yes, we have the same message. We're all telling people about Jesus. But we have to recognize gospel music as a art form just as much as country music is an art form, bluegrass is an art form.
Yeah.
Classical music is a art form. People go to school to take classical music. They would never take another genre and call it classical if it's not classical music. So I think we need to make a distinction between what CCM music is because it's a beautiful art form in itself, and gospel music is a beautiful art form in itself. And maybe sometimes they're just different. It doesn't. I don't. I personally
Yep.
believe that if Maverick City was a group full of white people, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. We wouldn't have this conversation. They would have automatically put them in the CCM category, but because they had black faces, they said this is a gospel group. Or the people who, again, the people who over Maverick City in the name probably saw a void in gospel music and said, we can make a lot of money over here in gospel because they're not doing none of this over here. And we can take these black kids and bring them over here and they could
Yep.
dominate over here. But
Yep.
they couldn't dominate the gospel by themselves, so they had to get Kirk Franklin. And Kirk Franklin couldn't dominate at CCM, so Maverick City had to get Kirk Franklin audience in CCM. And so what to me
Yeah.
looks like a personal strategy and game plan has affected the entire genre now. And I'm not scared to talk about it because
It's
I don't have any.
fascinating, these dynamics.
Yeah, it's a serious dynamic. We have to, and I appreciate you being willing to be open enough to talk to me about it, because there is so much tension racially in America that a lot of black people and white
Yeah.
people are not having these conversations. And I believe the more we have these conversations, the more we can get a better understanding for each other's culture.
One of the things that came up, is he was essentially criticizing the horizontal nature of gospel music,
Mhm.
right? And he equated, like, the vertical nature of CCM to being, like, the better way.
Yeah.
And what I see as, like, I love the horizontal side to gospel music because I think it's scriptural. The Bible tells us to sing to one another with psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs to testify and sing horizontally, not just vertically. But the way that he framed it was kind of like nobody wants to sing that. It's all about being vertical now. When you can't just say things like that, right? Because it's actually biblical to sing vertically and horizontally. It's not all
How do
about
we?
what's going to make the most money, right? It
How do?
comes back to this industry
Yeah.
and ministry tension.
Yes. How do we tell people about Jesus and we don't tell them how he affected us? Like, how do we,
Yeah,
if every time we're singing, if we're only supposed to open our mouth and sing up to Jesus, how do we minister to other people to say, how do we tell people about Jesus, but not without telling them our story? And here's the thing.
yeah,
Can we eliminate the myth that CCM is vertical and gospel is horizontal? Because I've heard plenty of horizontal CCM songs.
right,
Plenty of people have told this story about how they filthy trash and burn me up inside, Lord, because I didn't do this and I didn't do what I was supposed to do. You know what I'm saying? There's always a CCM song about burn me up. You know, it's like that's not
right,
vertical. That's horizontal. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
when did we get to the point where we're not supposed to tell our stories or our testimonies?
Yeah,
So if
that's
I
right.
say tragedies are common,
Yeah,
there's a song in gospel music that says tragedies are commonplace. All kinds of the diseases, people are slipping away. The economy's down. People can't get enough pay. But as for me, all I can say is thank you, Lord, for all you done for me. That's the testimony, right? But that's talking about the real thing that's happening right now.
right.
Economy is down. People can't get enough pay. Folks without homes, sleeping out in the streets. They say this drug habit can't be beat. These are songs that we tell
Mm,
stories of in order to be able to say,
yeah,
but I serve a savior that can deliver us from all of that. But if we just go straight to the
yeah,
intimate, you know what I'm saying? Now, David, a conversation that I would like to bring up to you as a producer is I personally believe we I'm just talking from the art perspective, not the ministry perspective. Because we have award shows that have categories, right? And you have to put it in a category. You have to put it in a box in order for people to be able to vote because there's 66 different genres that you vote for at the Grammys, right? I personally believe
right.
one thing that can help us is for us to, as far as the art form is concerned, and as far as the award shows like the Doves and the Stellar Awards and the Grammys, I think we should make worship its own category, and I think that would
Mm,
eliminate
okay.
half of the issues of why there's even a comparison between CCM and gospel. If we make worship music its own category and we separate it from contemporary gospel, just like they have a bluegrass category and they have a contemporary Christian category and they got a gospel category, I believe we should add a worship category. And then that way all the worship leaders, because what happened is when worship wave took over, all the worship leaders became artists. And so
Yeah.
the vertical movement that he's talking about is basically worship leader music. But as an artist,
Yep.
again, I grew up looking at Andre Crouch and different artists perform the Winans, the Clark sisters, the Hawkins. And I've seen video, you can look up videos of them performing in front of all white crowds, gospel music. And the whole time they were singing, nobody moved, or they might have clapped. And then Andre Crouch would finish his song, and the whole audience would stand up again with standing ovation. You understand what I'm saying? Because they sat there and they listened and they were able to appreciate the art form, right? When we do worship, we're sitting there more
Yeah.
than the artist is. we're singing more than the artist. We're singing along. If you listen to a
Yeah.
worship album, you can hear the audience singing louder than the art. Than the, and I don't want to pay for an album, the art. We're talking about the art form, and we're talking about the business. When I buy an album, I'm paying to hear the artist sing, not the audience. So that's like the
Yeah.
distinctions like that takes what's supposed to be just worship and it turns into an art form. Then it was just. Then I don't know if it's necessarily even what's supposed to ever be. Where we turn worship into artistry. I don't know if that was supposed to ever happen, but I do believe that we can separate
Wow.
the art form from worship. That's just my personal opinion because there's people that record music based off the cultural aspect of it. So if I like if I like up tempo funky music, I'll write a gospel song in that vein so we can have a good time. I don't even necessarily believe that every time I get in the car and turn on the radio, I'm supposed to be crying. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you can
Yeah.
be listening to it just for the listening for the art. You know what I mean? I think when we make worship,
Yeah.
we make worship part of the industry. Like I don't want to get in the car every time I turn on my radio and I got to pull over because I'm crying. I like listening to music, so I want to be able to drive my car and say, duh, 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 duh. Everything is not supposed to be a worship moment in my opinion. This is I know that sounds crazy because everybody's like, but he's supposed to worship him at all times. But if I'm in the gym and I'm on the treadmill and I'm trying to get turned up, I'm not trying to sit start crying and listen to the Maverick City. This type of music you listen to just to enjoy it.
What we see in the industry is people have seen how much worship sells, right? Like how much of an opportunity there is in worship music, right? And we saw this, I mean, even in the late 90s, early 2000s, where every CCM artist basically started to release worship albums. You had Third Day release a worship album, Michael W. Smith, worship album. Like everybody was releasing worship albums because there was that shift from CCM to worship music. And I feel like that shift has continued to the present day where worship is so dominant. And so what you're saying is it doesn't have to be this way, or it shouldn't be this way.
It doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. I just got back. I think it was May 1st. I went to Sweden for the Edward Hawk. I did a master class at the Edward Hawkins Music and Arts Seminar in Stockholm, Sweden. This was an event
Mhm.
that Donald Lawrence was the spearhead. His spearheaded this event, and ever since Edwin Hawkins, we lost Edwin Hawkins, I think about 5 years ago now, and Donald Lawrence has taken on the lead of this conference. But David, I never seen anything like this before. I went there. I wrote a song 25 years ago that's still a mainstay in gospel music called "More Than Anything." I love you, Jesus, more than anything. And my wife actually re-recorded it out there in Sweden. Uh, but the choir itself was 500 to 600 choir members, and they were from Oslo, Norway, Amsterdam, London, Paris, Berlin. This choir was comprised of 600 people from all over the world. The choir was about 85% white. Okay. It wasn't until I
Mm.
seen them record the song that I realized that they didn't want to sing. They didn't want to sing our version of CCM music. They wanted to sing gospel music. They wanted to sing the songs like our culture.
Mm.
They were trying to capture our
Yeah.
culture. Again, a choir full of people, 500 to 600 people from all over the world, and they were there for the gospel music seminar. They wanted to learn how to sing like a choir. They wanted three-part harmony. They wanted to hear how the band played the music, the rhythms that we played. They weren't trying to figure out how we can do CCM culture. You get what I'm saying? So I think
Right.
that I think that black culture is a commodity that we can bottle it up. It was still it was still off the shelves because of the soul and our story, what we bring to the table.
One of the issues in that whole narrative is that idea of erasure, cultural erasure, where it's like you're not respecting what originated in Black culture. You're just sort of taking it and then assimilating it into CCM
He has,
and then
yeah,
erasing
he
all
does.
of that
Yeah,
history.
it's the problem. He
That's a
let us know
problem.
that he doesn't know much. Everything you need to know about that interview, if you watch it one more time, Isaac didn't even have to ask. Isaac didn't even have to ask him too many questions. He just kept talking, just running his mouth, and he kept saying every time he opened up his mouth, he was dismissing us, our story, our culture. And I can see if he wrote the songs that changed the world, or I can see if he played the songs that changed the world. All he did was have enough money to buy the most popular group that was at the time and, expose them. And then you could kind of see that they started doing things that was not like, David, I'm going to be honest with you. When I saw that Maverick City do the own thing album, I was like, what's going on? What's happening here? And you could tell that they were trying to make a play in our culture. Like, that's a CCM group. And we all, Juneteenth is the celebration of slaves finding out they were free. But here's a label owner that's making them do
Right.
something in the name of justice. But really, it was just a novelty to sell more records. It doesn't have anything to do with our culture. If I hear that somebody's doing a Juneteenth album, I
That's
don't
right.
think I'm going to hear some of our culture. But it was basically a CCM album. So you could tell that Norman started making plays to do things. They was on the beat.
Yeah.
I saw Brandon Lake with cornrow braids on the BET Award doing a Diddy tribute. Like, what's going on? Like, he had braids. It was doing a Diddy tribute on the BET Awards.
Yeah.
Brandon Lake. Brandon Lake had cornrow
What is
braids
happening?
on the BET Awards
Right.
doing a Diddy tribute. Like, you could tell they started doing things to like make plays in different ways to make them all mainstream. They could have just it really and I feel sad. I think that, you know, um, I feel sad. Dante, I feel sad for Dante and Chandler and Naomi because they are amazing talents. But I really believe that they were used as pawns to corner a market and it just it didn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be where Norman would just speak so badly about our culture. And then honestly, I felt like Isaac should have spoke up because Isaac Caree is a 30-year veteran. He's done a lot of work in gospel music. He sings hard and he does runs. And so he should have been the first to speak up.
Yeah, and that's part of what I wanted to have this conversation, and I'm not under the
Yeah.
illusion that this conversation is going to spread like Isaac Caree's podcast will. But I want people to know that what Norman said, he does not speak for everybody. He does not speak for all of Black culture, and I want to be able to
I
highlight
appreciate
and
I appreciate
celebrate
you.
true Black culture and gospel music, and that's what I want this to be about. You know?
I don't think they even agree with what he said. I don't even know if the people that work with him agree with what he said, to be honest with you. And I think that he put a target on his company's back by saying that uh, you're crazy if you don't sign with us. We're the only. Who else you gonna sign with? He even he even attacked other black record
Yeah.
executives by saying, "I hated the way they ran those companies. I hated the way they ran RC. I hated the way they ran Motown. So I had them come on work for me." That even when he said that, I felt like that was an indictment on the executives he was speaking of because we have some great black executives in gospel music. Now the genre is taking a hit, and some of those executives and the companies have taken a hit, but they want the fact that we have black executives and you took an opportunity to say you hated the way they ran the companies, and then you hated it so much that you hired them to come work for you so we can corner the market.
Yeah.
And what happens if he corners the market for his company? And what if his company takes a hit? Then that means the whole genre of
Right.
gospel music takes a hit. If we all have to be cornered the market by him. It was a lot of things that was said that was not progressive, but I think the main takeaway
Right.
is to the generation of people that watch your podcast that are aspiring to do gospel or CCM or the blues, whatever, if they want to do a polka album, they need to know that the same tools that these record labels use to get music up on TuneCore or whatever the case may be, they just need to know it might be a harder journey. But I just feel like I felt the heart to say, hey, you're doing good if you can get 500 people, 300 people down to the Bluebird Cafe in Nashville and to do a show. You know what I mean? Or you're doing good and you can go to center stage in Atlanta
Yeah.
that holds 1,000 people and do a show. You're doing
Come on.
good. He said on there, if you got a number one on gospel radio, that ain't nothing. That's not true. If you got a number one song on gospel radio, you accomplished something. Everybody's not Forrest Frank. You know what I'm saying? Everybody's not going to get 17 million
That's
views a
right.
week on their song. But that doesn't mean you're not investing in the kingdom, or that doesn't mean you're not investing in your business sense. So I just think that what he said was more detrimental than helpful. And I don't have a problem with speaking up because I don't need anything from them. So I don't have a problem with speaking up and saying, yo, that's not the way it goes. You know what I'm saying? I don't feel like I'm gonna be blackballed in the industry for speaking my mind because I'm an independent thinker
Yeah.
and I'm an independent producer and writer as well. So I'm not emboldened to any company. Somebody needs to speak up.
You said this, Rick, in your post. You said money isn't everything. Grammys are not everything, but integrity is. Good character is. Don't be good at what you do and bad at who you are. Linking up with the wrong one can bring the brand you are building to the ground.
I got that mantra
That's preaching right there, brother.
listen, man, I got that mantra from my wife. My wife is the one who first said that to me. She said, some people are really good at what they do and bad at who they are. And it took me a while to really get it, right? So I think that Norman Gyamfi is probably really good at what he does. He went to Georgia Tech. He said he's an economist. He said he's studying money. He's probably really good at what he does, right? But what good is being uh, good at what you do if you're being repulsive and bad at who you are? Character means more to me than money. Let me tell you, I just turned 47 years old, right? And I've had, and I'm gonna be honest with you, and my mom passed in February, and I had to do a lot of reflection, right? Because I've been chasing this music for a long time, so there's been a lot of things that I missed, time that I wish I could get back to spend with my mom or my daughter who's 17 to go to college next year, or my wife. You know what I'm saying? And I've chased the music industry for so long, and so now at this age, I value time more than I value money. So money, I don't make decisions. I don't make decisions based off money.
Hmm.
I make decisions based off what's worth my time, right? So when I hear somebody and all they can speak up
Yeah.
about is how much money, and if you know Norman, I don't know Norman like that. I know of Norman, but I've seen Norman. He's a pretty flashy dude. That's why I didn't miss words when I called him Suge Knight or Ike Turner or, uh, you know, Don King with rings on all his fingers. It's like, uh, I didn't miss words with the type of character he is. Um, he thinks that he can just
Right.
write a check and then everybody will be impressed by the money and they'll make decisions based off the money. But what happens when you come in contact with somebody who's not making decisions based off money? They're making decisions based off integrity and being a good person. I don't think that you can't impress me by saying, yo, I'm selling out stadiums and we winning Grammys. And then turn around and tell us that you had a whole agenda to how you made that happen. Like, I don't know if that's something that we talked about so far in this, but that was a very, very enlightening conversation he had about the Grammys, which lets me know. He said, I want to quote him correctly. He said, we solved Kirk's crowd problem. He solved our awards problem. He gave us critical acclaim, and Maverick City gave him the streets back. That's exactly what he said. He said Maverick City gave him the streets back. Maverick City, a group that's not even 6 years old,
Yeah.
gave Kurt Franklin his credibility of somebody who has a 33-year career. That makes no sense to me. That makes no sense. And so that lets me know that, and then it also lets me know that
Not at all.
apparently something was said or something was done in order for them to win 2 Christian Grammys and 2 gospel Grammys in the same year. Two in the same year. They won 2 Christian gospel Grammys and turned right back around
Mm,
and came back on stage and won the gospel category.
yeah.
Now, he said Kirk solved our worst problem. I don't know what that means. I don't even know what that means. I don't even want to get involved in that. But I don't own a Grammy. But when he said that, my desire for a Grammy changed because I was like, people go their whole life working to try to get this piece of hardware. He just gave out he just let them know it was a formula that he used that just turned the whole situation around and they walked away with 4 Grammys. So that kind of diluted to me, that kind of diluted to me the award show process. And we all know there's
Yeah.
some, we know what it is, man. We know there's industry stuff that happens. We know there's some backdoor conversations, all that. But I don't think Norman was supposed to expose that on the Isaac Caree podcast. I have not missed words. I tagged Norman on my post just to let him know where I am with it. And I think that we need to amplify what he said and just make him be accountable for it. Like he needs
Yeah.
to be uncomfortable when he gets in certain rooms now. He needs to be uncomfortable. He needs to feel like, man, I really put my foot in my mouth this time.
Where do we go? Where do we go
Okay.
from here? What are some next steps for any of our listeners and taking this
I think
heavy information and what do we do with it?
I may have a few just some suggestions for solutions. Again, one, the the bigger problem is systemic. Okay, so we can start with gospel radio, right? Gospel radio dictates two things. It dictates the war season and it dictates the church and the cultures of churches. Way before Maverick City came, they were just the icing on the cake. But way before Maverick City came, you started to see this evolution of the black church, David, and where we had Hammond B3 organs and choir roll to choirs, we started seeing the Hammonds being replaced with acoustic guitars, and we started seeing the choir rolls being placed with flannel shirts, jeans, and t-shirts. And what happened was the identity of the black church started looking like elevation and hill songs, right? We can start with being proud of who we are. So there's a few things that can be done. We can start with being proud of who we are. And what I mean by that
Yeah.
is if you're a black gospel artist, be proud of that as opposed to trying to set yourself up as the black version of Stephen Furry, the black version of Hill Songs, the black version of Jesus Culture. You know what I mean? Like, we can start there. So
Amen.
we have to first take personal responsibility, and we have to say how much did I do was authentic, and how much did I do to try to please the radio formats? How much did I do to try to please the war shows? Because, like, I know for instance, the Stella Awards, the Black Gospel Award show, you were in order to submit your album to be considered for a nomination, you have to have a certain chart position. Well, if the radio stations are being dictated by backdoor money or who gets to the top of the charts, and if you say that I can't be
Mhm.
nominated on this award show unless I get a chart position, that means I got to play the game. And I don't. What if you don't want to play the game? My wife doesn't play the game. She's in it, but she's not of it. She's in the industry. She's done well. She's a three-time
Yep.
Grammy nominated artist. She
Wow.
has his songs, and she decided she made a conscious decision about 10 years ago. Like I don't know if I want to play this industry game, and so she's done everything to this point independently. She owns her masters. She put together her own tour. She's
Wow.
managing herself, and she's figured out the independent journey. And so she doesn't have to do the things that most artists have to do to play along. You know what I'm saying? It got real bad at one point. You asked me where do we go from here? Where we go from here is the first thing we need to do is have an identity check. Like, is the music that you're doing authentic to who you are as an artist? Or is the music you're doing what you feel like you have to do to get on the charts or you have to do to get invited to these tours, whatever the case may be? If you can separate realistic and make realistic goals of who you are as an artist. Again, everybody's not going to sing at a stadium, David. Everybody's not going to be able to sing at the same places that, uh, Kendrick Lamar is performing at. But if you can be authentic, so you have to take a personal responsibility. So I think the first step is taking a personal responsibility of artists and saying, am I capping or am I not capping? Am I being real? Am I being who I really am? Or am I trying to be Stephen Curtis Chapman or
Right.
some famous worship leader? Am I trying to be, you know, elevation, or am I trying to be authentic to who I am? That's the first thing. So the personal responsibility is the first thing. And then you have to have integrity enough to say, I'm not going to compromise who I am to fit any radio format, to fit any touring requirements, whatever the case. Because when you come off tour, you got to still be who you are. So you have to be authentic. And I'm like, hey, I would rather be an authentic artist and get some marginal success than to get a
Yeah.
big success singing a song that I don't even believe in, but I did just because I needed to make a radio format. That's the first thing. The second thing is we started these conversations that we're having are helping because you have a better understanding of who I am as a person, and I have a better understanding of who you are. We have different journeys, we have different stories, we live in two different places, but we can relate in a lot of ways. Because if you have a for worship music, you understand that the business side of it, that's the story of it is kind of
Right.
like really it gets to me sometimes because, and again, that goes back to the industry side because we all ministers. If we're doing gospel music or we're doing CCA music, we're all ministers and we have an opportunity to spread the word of Jesus Christ. But if we dilute it by saying, I want to spread the word of Jesus Christ, but it has to be this certain way because it's the house music out right now. And I want to get in mainstream and I want to be on Good Morning America and I want to be on Fox News and I want to be on all these different things. We have to be able to. So I think the first step is to be authentic. And then I also believe this is my true statement. I believe that the label structures are going away, at least in gospel. I don't know about CCM. I know I just got my publishing back. I was in a Capital publishing music deal. We have to address the systemic issues, man. We can't hide from the fact that there is some racial
Yep.
tensions going on even in the music industry. Um, 83%, and again, I'm not trying, this is not a political statement. I'm not trying I'm pretty sure there are some
Yeah.
people that listen to your podcast that might have supported Donald Trump. And again, this is not me equating you. We live in a democracy, so we are able to vote for who we vote for, but we're lying to ourselves if we don't think that there's some racial tensions going on and it's starting to affect the music. We're lying to ourselves if we don't have the hard conversations and say, hey, our culture is being compromised by another culture. And because, there was a point in time where some white record executives that I was working for uh, passed my wife a list of writers and white writers that wrote CCM worship songs that they said, well, we want to see you can look at this list and pick a song that maybe you can sing in a black, basically blackify the song. And so then you had, that's when I think that was around the same time I think Tasha Cobbs did Break Every Chain, and which is what a Jesus Culture song, I believe. And so we had to make a conscious decision to say that's not authentic to who we are. We don't want to sing the new. I'm trying to think of the guy who Chris Tomlin. It was a couple of Chris Tomlin
Yeah.
songs on that list that they were saying you should take this song and redo this in the black way. Well, no, that's Chris Tomlin's culture. Why would we take what he did and try to blackify it? But the truth of the matter is, the systemic part of it is they were just trying to recycle the publishing share because they already own the songs. So they saying take these songs that are already made millions of dollars on the CCM side, and you do a black version and go over there to the black church and say it,
Yep.
and then they'll buy another 2 million versions of the song. That's a systemic issue, man. Follow the money. Like, but but the question, ask yourself this: how many of our songs have they taken and sung in a white church and afforded us the opportunity to have millions of dollars in publishing? Like, I love Tasha Cobbs. That's our sister. I love Tasha Cobbs. That's our sister. But she didn't write Break Every Chain. So the more popular it becomes in the black church, the person who wrote Break Every Chain probably is on his second house in Brentwood, Tennessee. You know what I'm saying? That's as opposed now. What if somebody took one of my songs and started singing it over there at Bethel? Let one of our songs get in your system and see how the publishing can affect our culture. So if I wrote a song and Bethel recorded it, and it gets $2 million in 2 million, it sells 2 million singles, then that would help me and my family pay for where we eat and where my daughter goes to college and where we live. But we're singing all of their songs, and they're giving us a list. Hey, how about you sing this one?
Come on.
How about you sing this one's already been successful over here? How about you do it in the black church? How about you sing Waymaker, Miracle Worker, da 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 in the darkness over there at the black church, so we can make another $2 million off of it. But they're not singing none of our songs over there. So it's the systemic issue, and the more we ignore it, the worse it's going to keep. We need to talk about it now. We need to talk about it now. What is being done to empower our writers? Why are you asking us to these
Yeah.
people wrote over there that you already signed to a publishing deal? So you just try to revolve the publishing. How about you sing some of our songs, and then me and my wife can go buy a house in Birdwood, Tennessee? You know,
Letterman interview with Otis Blackwell, and this was forever ago. But basically kind of launched Elvis's career, wrote many of Elvis's songs. Otis basically admitted on that interview that he had to have Elvis's name as a songwriting credit in order for Elvis to do the song, when Elvis had nothing to do with the songwriting. He had nothing to do with it. But in order to even get into the system, he had to sort of just accommodate, some of that. They never even met. And he was very instrumental in Elvis becoming who he became, So this goes back a long time.
yeah, I could tell you many stories. There was a movie that was Cadillac Records, or one of those records where they took some songs that like some of the black artists was writing, and they gave them to like those groups like the Beach Boys or whatever. Who I mean, as far as I just watched a documentary called Yacht Rock. I don't know if you saw the Yacht Rock documentary. It's a good watch. It's on I believe it's on Apple or HBO, one of those. But it talks about
Yeah.
groups like Toto and Steely Dan and Kenny Loggins, and they were interviewing these people, and they were talking about how influenced they were by Earth, Wind and Fire and Stevie Wonder. So yacht rock is a subgenre that was birthed out of black music, but it was basically white musicians who were studying at the time the sound of the '70s, which was Stevie Wonder, Earth, Wind and Fire, Sly and the Family Stone, all of those groups of that kind, and that genre was birthed out of love for black music. If you look at the Aretha Franklin documentary that was released, where she recorded her album, her first gospel album, if you look in her audience, Mick Jagger's sitting in the back row, taking notes
Wow.
of Aretha Franklin singing. You know what I'm saying? Uh, if you watch the Bee Gees documentary that came on, I'm a documentary fan. So if you watch the Bee Gees documentary that came on about them making Staying Alive and all of that, they were talking about in that movie how much they were emulating black artists like the Stylistics and the Spinners from the '70s. So I'm saying all that to say that most times, if you look at a lot of culture, a lot of rock and roll, whether it's the rock and roll, whether it's blues, you mentioned Elvis, we cannot deny the effects of black culture, even on white music. So to turn
Yeah.
around 2025 and see a group basically eliminating the soul and the very element of who we are, to dumb it down to have an experience as level to be leveled with hill songs and Jesus culture, and to calm our culture down. We're too loud, we do too many runs, let's sing it like these white people do. I feel like Norman did a disservice to Maverick City and what they really stand for. Because I really believe that, I know I've been running on for a long time now, but I really believe that what they started was pure. And I believe that the industry goons got involved and bought the rights to the group and put forth their own agenda. Now, I will say this. I found it very interesting that I'm glad that we're talking this morning, because last night I got a chance to watch Naomi Rain's podcast with Lecrae. And she
Yeah, I
said,
haven't seen that yet.
okay, I watched it last night. She said that Maverick City, the way, because Lecrae asked her what the origin of Maverick City was. And when I found out, I had already heard this, but when I seen her confirm it yesterday, I was like, wow. Maverick City started because Bethel had a casting call for Black writers for Black History Month and brought all these kids to Bethel to do writing sessions. And they recorded the writing sessions, and that's how Maverick City started. So Maverick City started, even though they were Black faces, it was started by Bethel, which, to my account, I'm not trying to speak down on Bethel, but I do know that they line up a lot with a lot was going on with this administration. So to know that that
Yeah.
group was birthed out of a Black History casting call is suspect in itself.
Whew.
It's suspect in itself. But to take them and sign them and to strip them of their initial purpose and identity and say this is going to be the Black group that crosses CCMO over to the Black church, that agenda is why a lot of people are anti Maverick City.
Are you familiar with Common Hymnal, Rick?
Common hymnal.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% familiar.
Because I want to say that even Maverick City has some origins with Common Hymnal, um, which is they're sort of a fringe worship and music movement. They talk about praise and protest. You should check it out. Like they're really
I'm
awesome.
gonna
My
check it
friend
out.
Malcolm is kind of behind some of that, but I feel like there's some origination there too with Maverick City and a little bit of a story there, but I love what they're doing. And,
I want to check it
but
out.
yeah, all these cultural dynamics, so many people just are completely unaware of how the sausage is made, what goes on behind the scenes. We see these holy revival narratives on social media, but we don't understand how our systems are hurting people and are hurting culture.
Yes.
And we have to be able to talk about it like this in a way that is down to earth, it's
Yes.
real,
Mhm.
it's healthy, and we need more people, more of the influential heavy hitters too, to not just bask in their riches, but to talk about
Oh,
this
man.
too, and to care not just for Black culture, but Black people, you know?
I think,
Come on.
yeah, let's talk about it real. Like, that's why I've been quite, cause just so you know, I'm a pretty private person, so I don't really talk much out loud or in like public. I think that
Yeah,
I said it in my post. I think that the smarter you get, sometimes you need to get a little bit more quieter because, am I wrong when am I wrong in my
yeah,
depiction of what Bethel is or what they represent as far as who? I just know that they line themselves up a lot with what what's going on now. And then I did the research and found out that 83% of evangelicals support Donald Trump. Again, we cannot ignore that because they had enough power to put him off. That's if he won the election outright and not with any help from Elon Musk, but that's a whole nother story. But if it to be true that Donald Trump won the
yeah,
election, the evangelicals put him there. Norman and Sean Few probably had the same ideologies. But what happened is it's anti-black. I don't have a problem with saying that
yeah,
because I don't know what could be, I don't, a lot of people don't want to say that because a lot of people don't want to speak up because they feel like it would affect their bottom line. And like, I don't expect, I'm not putting any, uh, uh, hope into Kirk Franklin getting out because Kirk Franklin is Norman's partner. So they might have some of the same. I don't think Kirk has the same
right.
ideologies, but I do think that they have the same. And I'm being careful with my words. I believe they have the same mindset of what the plan is, and I think that it. So we can't expect people that's getting a check to speak up too much. I have made the decision to speak up because God has been good to me, and I've put a lot of work into this industry. So I receive publishing and royalties for my work that are not they'll come whether or not I speak up or not. But I think me speaking up um, right now and not being afraid to speak up is because nobody it's not many people that are. It was time, and when the history books are written, and we get on the other side of history, and once the whole MAGA movement is behind us,
Yeah.
and all those things, and people will line themselves up with the MAGA movement are on the wrong side of history. I want to be able to 10 years from now, somebody be able to look up David's podcast and see that I tried my best to speak up and say, "Yo, it's okay to be proud of your culture. It doesn't make you racist to be proud of your culture. We are black. We have a black culture that
Yeah.
is being uh, that is being diluted, and I don't have a problem with speaking up to it because, again, gospel music, I've benefited from gospel music. I have never, I don't remember a time that I have not benefited from gospel music, not just monetarily, but just by the people that I've met through gospel music. I've met you through this. I've met different people. So my relationships is more, to me, is wealthy. Is
Right.
wealth because I've met a lot of good people through this genre of music. Authenticity is the first step to it of how we go, where do we go from here. You have to decide, am I supposed to be an artist? Or am I just supposed to sing in my church? If I am going to be an artist, how much do I know about the business? Because there's so many people that's floating around the business that don't even know anything about it. Yeah, I mean, to me, that's what a culture vulture is. Somebody who does not have the talent themselves. So I need to go find somebody who does and see how I can exploit them. Norman couldn't sing a song he wanted to. He couldn't produce a song if he wanted to. He couldn't play a song if he wanted to. He couldn't do it. He let us know that he has not a musical bone in his body. But he
I'll
also
delete
said,
that.
I don't have a musical bone in my body and I got more Grammys than people that you know. So that's the problem. I just really, if we don't get anything else from this podcast, I hope we can just, as me being a black man, you being a white man, can have a conversation saying, to at least admit there's a systemic issue in the music industry. And it always has been, and it always will
Yeah.
be, but it's getting worse uh, with the times, with what's going on all over with the times. And I feel like um, I think that these conversations can help. So that's where we can go from here. We can have a conversation about the lane structures, the workshop
Yeah.
structures. It's a lot of things that, but we gotta have the conversation. Can't be scared to talk to each other about real stuff.
Yeah, and I think, Rick,
No, we
there's
have.
there's room for all of us. There doesn't have to be this paradigm of white supremacy where black culture feels like they have to assimilate. There's room for the beauty of white culture and there's room for the beauty of black culture to coexist in a healthy way. I'm not sure we've ever gotten there historically, but I believe that that can
Yeah,
happen, but it
yeah.
takes humility, especially on behalf of people that look like me, on behalf of white people, to not just appropriate culture and assimilate culture, but to humble ourselves and to celebrate black culture, all of black culture, not just the singing, not just the music, all of it. And so that's what I hope that this conversation just gets people thinking, maybe people that don't even know there's any systemic. I think there's a lot of white people, especially, that don't even know there's any systemic stuff going on. They're completely ignorant. And hopefully this just shines a light on some of that. Yeah.
David, it is, and I appreciate you, man. It is a definite, yeah. I'm not scared to speak of it. This year, I I have been blessed enough to get my publishing catalog back. Again, I told you I have 99, I think about 98, 99 published songs. But I started
Amazing.
off with my first, thank you. I started off with my first publishing deal at Capital Christian Music Group. Okay. My first year that I signed my deal at Capitol, I was invited to a writing camp in Frankfort, Tennessee. I want to say it was like 35 writers that was invited to this camp, and it was at a retreat center in Frankfurt, in the middle of the woods, or somewhere. That at night, if you put your hand in front of your face, you could even see it. That's how far out in the woods we were at, right? I'm not lying, David. Songs was there, Planet Shakers was there, Jesus Culture was there. I was the only black person out of 35 writers. Only black person out of
Wow.
35 writers. Now, this happened at the same time, like around the same time that the movie Get Out came out. So when I found out I was the only black person at the retreat, I called my wife. I said, if you don't hear from me you don't hear from me by Thursday, come to my man. I said, if you don't hear from me by Thursday, this is where I'm at. Come find me. You know what I'm saying? So like, I'm saying that in
That's
a joking way
amazing.
because I this is around the same time that we get out. But my point I'm trying to make is, I was the only black writer out of 35. That's a problem. And
Yeah,
I think those are the type of, because you know, like you said, there's some people that aren't aware there's a systemic issue going on. That is a problem.
that's a
That is a
problem.
problem that I was the only black writer invited to a writing camp with 35 different writers. Um, I'm out of that deal now, and I really don't. I don't. I'm out of that deal, but I did see that as the issue. I spoke. I said that to. I said that to the people. Like, why am I the only guy out here with this perspective?
Yeah,
I don't want to hear any more of our stories, or you don't want to hear anything I got. You more people that look like you, or sound like me, or play like me have to say, or are we all going to just sit at this campfire and play guitars and sing "Burn Me Up" songs? You know what I mean? It's just like, I have something. We have
yeah,
something we can offer to the table, and I think that the more we can sit at the table together and really just respect each other's cultures, the better the system would be. But it's like, no, we have this over here, and y'all have that over there, and we're gonna keep this over here. We're gonna keep this over there, and then if we do decide to make something happen, we're gonna get some black kids to do what we do, and then bring it over there. As opposed to, because in my opinion, if Maverick City is just good, Maverick City is a good group. Why can't they go against? Why can't it be Maverick City against Jesus Culture and Planet Checkers and Hillsongs in the category? Why does it have to be? No, we're gonna send them over there to the gospel category so they can win over
yeah.
there big. Why can't we see if Dante Volk can go against Chris Tomlin and win the award? Why can't we see if Chandler Moore put him up against Brandon Lake and see if he can win the award? Why send him over there to say they'll definitely dominate the gospel? So I think the fear, the fear of, maybe there's a fear from the CCM side that some of our talents will come over there and dominate. I know that everybody wasn't happy about Kanye West winning the Christian award.
Yeah,
Right. So why didn't you do? So let's change the category
right.
for us. Let's create a worship category. That way, gospel doesn't have to compete with CCM. That's all I'm saying. Because we lose every time that they make the black genre compete with CCM. It's just the unfortunate truth.
Yeah. Well, they weren't happy with Beyonce winning country album of the year or whatever, you know? They had to change the category after that happened, you know?
Yeah, I agree. Huh? And then again, we can't ignore the DEI initiatives that are being taken away.
Yeah.
Um, which I know has been weaponized. When I hear DEI, when I hear anybody that's white say
Yeah.
DEI, that makes me think they're saying didn't earn it. DEI stands for didn't earn it. When I hear somebody say DEI, when I hear a white person say DEI, that makes me feel like it earned it. Even though the people that benefit the most from DEI initiatives, the number one people that benefit from DEI initiatives is white women. But they have co-opted the word and made DEI and woke negative connotations. But the truth of the matter is, we wouldn't have needed those initiatives if we were given the opportunities in the first place. So the fact that DEI initiatives had to be created in the first place lets you know the uneven playing ground. You know what I'm saying? Maverick City didn't just start and build all the way up to go to the arena stage. They started in arenas because Bethel was supporting them.
Wow.
So they were given an advantage by a white church. It's the truth. And until we start saying something like that and
Mm.
talk the truth and say, well, why are we down here and there? Well, they had an advantage. I would be rich too if I had Bethel supporting my whole music career. And yet, how are we supposed to feel when we turn on the news and see Paula White got all of them at the White House singing worship
Yeah.
songs? They're not singing. First of all, it wasn't even any black people well, they might have been one or two, but it might have been Eddie James or one of them. But it was all white people that was at the White House worship. Why can't we go to the
Yeah.
White House and worship with y'all? Why can't we do gospel music in the White House? Why is it me and CCM? Now they had a
Yep.
worship services at the White House. But these are the same people who go to the, I call it the MAGA church, not the mega church, the MAGA church. And how much detriment this administration has done to my people. So now it seems like the soundtrack to this administration is worship music. But I do want to thank you for thinking of me to be a part of this. I am very grateful to meet you, to hear your perspective. It feels
Yes.
good, David, to know. It feels good. I'm gonna be honest, it feels good. I don't view everything through color. I don't judge people based on their color, but it definitely feels good to see a white brother who's in this who's in this conversation with us and see and can hear and see our plight of what we're trying to of how we feel. Uh, I appreciate you looking past your own views to hear what I have to say. I'm hoping that I have said something to you. You've said a lot to me that's going to make me think and reflect and figure out how we can get better in relations as far as how we can communicate our stories. So I'm just grateful that you took time to talk to me today, to hear me, not judgmental, just to hear my story and to see why I have the convictions that I have. And I do love what I do. I love my genre. I love people. I love my culture. I do love other cultures and respect other cultures. So I'm just trying to find out how we can get to a happy medium. And it feels good to know that everybody isn't rocked to sleep by the worship songs and that they're actually seeing what's happening right now. I'm glad that you can see through Norman and his ways and the cultural vulture ways of trying to take our culture. So I just wanted to say I'm
Yep.
grateful to you to talk to you this morning, David, and glad to meet you and glad that we had this conversation. And I hope this is just the beginning of a series of conversations that we can get to a better place.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm honored to have you on here. And Rick, I grew up in the white evangelical church, man. Like that's my history. But over the last, 5, 10 years, to me, it's just been like what we've become in a lot of ways just does not look like Jesus, you know? And that hurts me. And so I'm enriched by black artists and black culture, and I believe in it, and I want to be part of the solution in bridging together some of these racial divisions that we've invented. We've invented them. They don't have to be there. So, appreciate you, man. Thank you.